Okay, we're going to be back. It'd be good. We picked up from where we were yesterday, and everything is so good. And in the audience, happy to have you. Welcome to the program, to this part 2 of a 2-part program we're doing with Colia Clark, who we might introduce you. This is part 2 of a 2-part series. She was the candidate for the Senate from the United States Senate from New York as a Green Party member. Did very well in this recent election, and she's also a pioneer civil rights leader, and she's also one who has visited to the country of Libya, and we were talking on the program that ended yesterday, and we're picking up on that, about the country of Libya after talking about a lot of other big existential issues and so forth. And welcome back, Colia, to the second part.
Thank you. It's always good to be here with you, Harold.
We were just talking about Mr. Gaddafi in Libya, and I had shared with you, I'd been there about 7 or 8 times, only country I was interested in because of my own reading of things. And we had talked about how he had to set up that Jamahiriya, which means state of the masses. And also we were talking about, as we began that program, which should underscore here, we think that there's an existential challenge to everything in a very real sense that might lead to teach-ins starting to emerge across the country about where we stand on large issues and so forth. But we were talking about the country of Libya because we both have an interest in it. And we talked that he said Jamahiriya, they had participatory democracy they've tried to put in place. And they had people's meeting halls everywhere, and everybody over 18 years old was able to go to that, and they were informed about the condition. So it'd be like people's conference, like town hall meetings, like we used to have in New England. And it's participatory democracy. People participating directly in the political process is a progressive idea in broad general terms. And he had done that politically, and then also he called it the socialist Jamahiriya. A lot of people, progressives or of the left, would think of socialism with Castro, or even back to Marx and Bolsheviks and all of that, and that they had a certain take on things, that the government can do things well, and that the capitalist accumulation is something that's to be challenged and so forth. But it was socialist, and he had taken the money that came in the country of Libya, which was a great amount, because the oil is very, very rich, it's very favorable, really well position to the European and other market, but he had spread the money that came in large amounts around, and that all the human index indicators had gotten to be where the people, by and large, these things all have to be looked at in detail and everything, but they had gotten to be where everybody had education. They got to 97% literacy from practically zero, and all the other indicators, public health, sanitation, electricity in every village, people owning their own home, people owning their own automobile, education, health was all made available to them, to where they had the leading indicators of all the UN figures and so forth on those things within a brief 20, 30-year period, testing that principle. But then we were just ending the last program that we aired yesterday. We were talking about the private sector. He did not, and I think it's good for us to keep in mind that in a large measure, the Arab and also the Islamic broader community, 1/4 of the world population adhere to Islam, are not necessarily in opposition to the institution of private property or even a private sector, which is something that people of a progressive nature might think that that's an evil institution, at least inadequate. But he had a private sector. And you'll remember, Colia, you were there just recently. Were you with Cynthia then? Cynthia McKinney?
With Cynthia McKinney.
God bless her. Give her the best regard.
And 16 other people from the United States of America.
But they have these little signs everywhere, like Burma Shea says, it says partners, not wage earners. And we're just wading into this, and then that'll get into larger issues perhaps. But they have partners, not wage, and if you could start a private sector enterprise, entrepreneurially. I remember I saw some people who were doing a pasta factory and everything, and he had a thing, and he was trying to, and they wanted, with the political, as much as they possibly could, have sovereignty vested at the level of the people's congresses, which is, that's political. But economically, you could have a business, and they would help you in the startup if you're a Libyan and that, but they had a real unique thing. and they had little signs that were partners, not wage earners.
Right.
They questioned, in a certain sense, the labor theory of value, which is something to have into account. And if you started a business there, you could start a business and everything, but you couldn't hire anybody.
Right.
Now, just think about that for a second. That's the philosopher's stone or whatever. We've got to get jobs for everybody, let's say in the recovery that we're trying to go through here in the United States and other parts of the world. And the way that we distribute income to the masses of the people is strictly through, practically for everybody, through their labor participation in production.
Right.
And there you had to be the people who made up the company, they will be employees or something, they had to be owners of the capital assets of the company. And that's something that's very interesting and so forth on the economic front. So maybe we could pick it up.
Yeah,
what do you think of that idea?
Let's get a job, get a job, get a job, a job.
Job, I think that's
Job,
true.
Yeah, I mean, so what's happening in those old ghetto stuff from New York, Pennsylvania area from years going by, when I first came north and people were saying, I got to get me a Job.
Oh, yeah, right. They did say that.
Yeah,
I'm happy to like Job from the Bible.
Suffering,
long suffering, right. Wage slavery is also attached to it.
But moving away from the wage slavery piece of the concept of having to bond yourself to somebody, to a company, to an individual where you are the worker, you are the servant, and saying that, well, we're going to develop a business, we're all now owners.
Yeah, now that's not characteristics of the way the American economy works.
Oh no, this has nothing to do with the American economy. This is the absolutely opposite of the American economy.
Well, yes it is, but it does have a role for the private sector. That's the point.
My whole point, yes, this is the private sector. So you're saying that, but you're going to be out here as developers together. So we start a business, and so it's partners and not workers. And so we're going to work together as partners.
Well, partners you can do in terms of your partners on a golf team or something, but it's also that you have, you could have an ownership stake in, let's just say, a piece of the action, as they would say. This is addressing perhaps the right-wing kind of concepts here, because we have a country where I brought in, I forgot to bring them, but they're charts that show wealth and income in the United States in terms of, 20 percentiles going down and everything. And it's all totally concentrated, the wealth is all totally concentrated in the upper class of society, even down to where it's up to really seriously in the upper 1%.
Yes.
And that's characteristic of the world. The capital assets are all owned by a tiny plutocratic class, and then everybody else is the only way they can think that they're going to get income to buy food for the kiddies and things is to have a job. Essentially on the estate of the people who own all the assets and set the templates for all the institutions, it's rather like indentured slavery, but it's tied up with things like the work ethic and a lot of things that they try to have people relate to, and it's the only way we've been able to distribute what the economists would call demand to the people in a large way, which we did very well in the United States after the Second World War. We needed those workers in the factory to turn out things and so forth, and we built a real serious middle class. We had tax rates from 90 percentile under they taxed up to 90% under Eisenhower. Never got less than 70% till we get up to the modern era in terms of the taxing of the wealthy in order to distribute and create jobs, and they needed the jobs. But the trend is for more and more of the work of the world to be done by capital instruments, and the labor input to production is in the United States is diminishing almost to the vanishing point. It'll always be there. But the real growth in the economy is in the area of capital instruments, and those capital instruments, or technology, is owned by a tiny plutocratic class, and it's just assumed that's the way the universe is set up. Do you understand? His was the only economy, even China is state capitalism, it seems
Sure.
to me, doesn't it to you?
Yes, no, without a
It
question.
seems that way.
Yes.
You got 1 billion people still living on a couple dollars a day in that country.
Right.
I mean, so you got a problem if you're only going to distribute ownership of private property, stock ownership, even you could say, in a private sector entity. It should be democratized. Everybody should have ownership as a means of distributing demand instead of just saying, improve yourself, work hard, and the work ethic that they say, and the only way to get money to people is through creating jobs, and that is being challenged by the larger structural issues of the evolution of the world economy. Can you follow all that?
I can
and can we
follow
pick
that.
up
Yes,
on it?
yes.
And his was the only country in the world that questioned that labor relationship for the masses, as opposed to, and that there has to be distribution of capital ownership by the masses, and only to get buying power in the hands of people to clear the market of what can be produced by automated systems, which is the trend of the world.
What it says to me is that
Ahead of the history's curve.
we're far ahead of history curve. What it says to me is that all the people can participate
As
in the
owners.
production and the ownership of the resources, in the production
And the technology.
and the technology, that all of the people can participate in that, rather than us having to say, well, we have this little small group here. And they will be served by administrators of various sorts and managers.
Right.
And they will be served by all of this common labor. And
Or labor in all of its aspects. Most people, the ownership of capital instruments is very narrowly held.
yes,
It's almost minuscule.
sure.
And in terms of the growth, I mean, that's what I'm saying. That idea that we can get jobs is being questioned, and the recovery that we're all hoping should come along like it did after all the other recessions seems to have hit a brick wall. Now, it may or may not be true. Maybe it's true. We're going to get jobs. Everybody's going to have a...
Harold, if we
and
get
so-
jobs, we'd be working at a penny a day. Let us face
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
The technology, this advanced age of cybernetics, with the capital instruments you talk about, has replaced a good 2/3 of the workforce. Common sense dictates, and I'm sure we know that those in power understand this. Common sense dictates that we need a new. This is where I begin to talk about the new paradigm.
Right.
That we must have a new economic paradigm, and we must have it quickly.
Okay.
And I'm not too sure that the old forms of socialism that we've talked about, or Marxism, are exactly what we need. I like the you get me Jamal concept because it says that the worker is not. We can set work aside. Don't have to be servants to any system.
Well, that was
individual.
a good deal of the needs, and this is another division in the economic order. A lot of the needs are absolutely certain: housing, education, things are known, and that can be a large measure done. And the government part, the public sector, is responsible for the stability of the national order.
Yes.
So the government has got a very important role, particularly in terms of providing needs of people.
Yeah, but when we look at America, where right now, we started out talking about the Tea Party.
Oh, well.
And the Tea Party's demands on state, and the Tea Party's demand for cuts in budget and elimination of this, that, and the other.
Things that the government have been able to provide well.
That's
and
right.
build up
That's
a
right.
public school system and all that. Yeah,
yes,
right.
and then we look at the Tea Party in Wisconsin, and they're talking about cutting teacher salaries, cutting schools, as we are in New York, but in a different way. And it's a Tea Party governor who is demanding also that labor itself, and the right to collective bargaining, the rights of unions be dismissed.
Yeah.
Period. Eliminate them through the law.
Yeah, they would, and they're able to do that not only because they're ideologically motivated in terms of favoring capital or the leaders, so-called, and everything, but also that there's something structurally built into the evolution of the whole economic order that is making it possible for them not, the labor organizations, I think it's down to about 5% in the private sector as any
That's right.
labor union represent.
Less than 15 million.
Yeah, it used to be, you know, million. It used to be up 40%.
That's right.
Lane Kirkland.
But down to less than 15
Ruther.
million unionized workers.
Yeah, in the private sector, and then the public sector, they have some. They want to, and so the power of labor to bargain in a bargaining sense that they did during the 40s, 50s, 60s, and so forth, is diminishing. Not just only because of politics, which is there, and you got the absurdity of that Tea Party thing, where they're questioning, as we are questioning, the validity of the order. But we should be coming from a different perspective than they are.
That's right.
But they're questioning that and everything. But it's structural.
It's no question about it. But you know what I'm looking at though, Harold, is that we start out talking about Republican and Tea Party, and then we get Massachusetts.
Yeah. They're going.
And Massachusetts is Democratic. So we have this one animal, not two parties. One party with two heads.
Well, okay.
And so we need to look at that. So the democracy itself. But what are they doing? They're challenging basic worker needs. Down to obviously the retired workers, we're talking about Medicare. Now, workers that are at the lowest end of the scale, we're talking about Medicaid. Cut Social Security, which was put in place by the Roosevelt administration to protect workers.
In 1935.
Yes, but these are worker protections, so that you grow old or you have need, and there's something in place. And you contributed to that. It's not something where the government just put up all this money for Social Security. The worker
paid into it all.
Pays into this, and of course, if you looked at double interest rates and the workers' interest keeps doubling. So, except there's millions upon millions of workers, which makes it a bigger system. Also, first you robbed the damn system under Reagan. We robbed Social Security. So we first rob it, and now we want to destroy it. Well, so what I'm saying is that we see this thing called worker being reduced to zero in the United States.
Well, that's a little bit extreme. We're always going to need labor. We're always
no, but I mean by zero, by zero.
The input to production is changing. That's it. If I may, I got a chart. I didn't bring it. I should have, but you can visualize it. If you look at the United States of America, 1776 to the present and so forth, Thomas Jefferson's time, we had a vast continent, a very rich resource and so forth.
I guess so. My people were working to provide.
Well, it was slave labor.
You had to say nothing but capital.
The worst slavery ever in the history of the world. That's I do believe what happened in North America. But you had if you looked at the economy then, 1776, you just got the steam engine. There was no manufacturing. It took you 12 hours to make a pair of boots. But in overall terms, about 85% of or 90% of the production was human labor. It was really necessary in order to have, let's just say, mostly goods and services and so forth. And if you looked at the trend, if you had it read in a certain way with reasonably competitive markets, which the international order is going to force upon the world system, you're not going to be able to just make work and so forth, presumably. But it goes like that, and it probably has gone up now to where it's just about reversed. About 15% only of the production in the current economy is done by labor. They've about reversed from the time when we set up our paradigm. They've about reversed, and what it is, and those capital instruments are what is responsible for production, and those capital instruments are plutocratically held by a small class of people. And the only way to distribute income to people is to have them have a job. They were needed even in mid-century. You had to have people on the assembly line to make a Ford. You needed people. Now you don't. And the cybernetic process is one, you get an algorithm that can misplace 150 people watching a keyboard or something. And, that's going to come to be. So the idea that Mr. Obama, let's just say Mr. Obama is here. He was elected. He was talking to hope and all that. And the only thing they talk about, they have to bail out billions of dollars to the banking people. They need more yachts and whatnot, and take all those mortgage loans, everything that happened in that. He had to do that to save capitalism. And then all they say is, well, we'll get a recovery. We will get jobs. And please, would you hire some of you people? Would you hire our people so that they can get money to buy food for the kiddies?
Yeah, but at less wages.
Yeah, well, they would
bringing it down, so the wages are going down.
Yes, they would.
Everything's going down.
They've all been bargaining down. The unions have all. They've all been.
Libya's taking $50 billion of Libya's money from the Libyan National Bank. Preparing, it looks like, to invade Algeria and probably other parts of the world. Already out in Afghanistan and Iraq, doing what? Taking folks' resources. Because it's the only way these dying capitalist states can stay alive. And America's a dying capitalist state.
I wanted to stay with the point for the United States, and then we come back to it, because the only and so what that is, that's the trend of history. That's like you had feudalism for 1,000 years in Rome. After Rome, in Europe and everything, and then there came the steam engine. And there came the Enlightenment, and there came Hume and the Scottish Enlightenment, and there came, the United States of America, and everything. And so the system that would call itself legitimate was supplanted by the United States making a challenge to that in 1776. They made a challenge to that. That paradigm was in place with all the Charageresque institutions and so forth that built for 230 years based on that idea, has now come to a point where it's so mired down in outdated notions of what has to happen within a scarcity assumption, which was valid at the time, all of these things, and that you can have the capital assets all owned by a tiny class, let all the decisions be made by them like earls on a feudal estate, the bankers and so forth, and that it doesn't, and that all the ownership and the growth of that is going absolutely astronomical. It's all going to the people who own the assets, and there's no way to spread ownership to the people, and never given serious consideration of having the capital formed in a way where ownership is in the hand of the people. Let's just say a private property stock ownership is democratically held by the people, if only as a way of distributing demand, so the people at large will be able to clear the market if you have automated production that don't need workers.
You can either do
you
that.
Understand?
You can either do that, or the worker must demand to be owner. Period.
Well, no, that's how did but they become an owner of what? They become an owner of
whatever resources are being developed.
You're
developing trucks, the workers own the trucks, and the workers need to develop
the wealth producing, the factories, the institutions.
But workers have a right to own those.
Yeah, but that is such a revolutionary idea. Everybody just accepts. Well, the only way for me to get money for the kiddies is to have a job on Master's estate. That's the assumption that is given by the fact that you're going to create some jobs.
If Massa wants to be comfortable, when you look at 300 million people looking at you, then Massa has to figure out a way to share.
Thank you, but that's a change that Massa doesn't want to hear. They didn't want to hear it.
They didn't want to hear it. The people must begin to hear that we're not going to starve.
Yeah, but they're not hearing it. They're not hearing it. The leadership, Geithner and all the people, all they're going to say, teaching, maybe, okay. But you understand what I'm saying? Massa didn't want to hear we're in slavery.
That's right.
We need slavery. We got to have slavery. You see, Massa
doesn't. Who rose up?
Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I understand what you're saying. So who rose up?
Huge.
The slave rises up, and the other parts of the community that were directly affected by slavery who said, no, we can't be with this.
Yeah, but we got nobody rising up on what we call loosely the progressive intellectual left.
Because they don't understand.
They don't, because they're tied into the idea that it's so, and realize how difficult it is. People get a sense, and it's not going to be eliminated. It's not that, and it's the way the capital is formed. The capital is formed in a way where somebody owns a piece of stock in a company.
That's right.
Including the buildings, including that.
That's right.
And if you own that, you get rich as you sleep, because the value is going up all the time. Okay?
Or you get rich because you own some land that you're not using.
Whatever.
So you throw it in soil bank and you collect directly from the government.
Whatever.
So what I'm saying is,
but the people aren't in on that.
People have to understand how the system works.
Okay, well, and also how the system changes through time.
Yes.
What was relevant in the past is not relevant to the future. And just like we were ahead of history's curve, vis-a-vis feudalism in 1776. We set up all these institutions, International Monetary Fund. We had all the academic. We did all this stuff and everything, and that more or less is the template that all the world has bought into.
And that's what's challenged.
And they call themselves legitimate.
And they're challenged. They're challenged by Africa. We're just setting up the African Monetary Fund.
Okay.
They're setting up the African investment banks.
Trying to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now they got to fight that.
They're in the process now. This is what Gaddafi was involved in.
This
is what they're angry about. You can't have an African Monetary Fund.
Yeah.
You can't have an African investment bank. You can't have Nigeria printing money that France has been providing.
Maybe denominating oil.
France gets a good deal of her dollars off of her francs, off of Africa, well, these euros now, francs and euros, off of Africa, printing money for Africa.
Right.
It's over.
Yeah,
and so we move into another era.
Yeah.
You can't have it, Harold, when by 2020, the third African satellite will be in place.
Yeah,
right?
okay.
You got the first one that's out there with Gaddafi, got us telephones, and even in remote villages, people can pick up a telephone. You got the second one, which China and Russia made a contribution.
It's growing.
Is remarkable. So that one's up. But now, and that went up, by the way, in 2010. And I like December because the first one up to December 26th, right after Christmas.
Oh, yeah. Boxing Day.
2007.
Box that sucker in. Yeah.
And then the next one comes up around 15th and 16th of 2010. And now you got you're talking about 2020, a satellite going up, produced entirely in Africa.
Okay, that's
in
good.
Algeria, going up to do what? To provide Africa with everything and needs compete with any other satellite in the world.
There's something wrong with that.
10 times less money.
Yeah.
Of course there's something wrong with that.
Something wrong with that from the standpoint of the people on Wall Street.
Amen.
And the people in Washington,
That's right. So
Roma and the
destroy
Potomac.
that which produces that.
Well, okay, and back again, because we were talking about Libya. We can go on other fields.
We're talking about Libya and America because we're talking about us being reduced to nothing and not understanding our relationship to what's happening in Africa.
That's right. And
what's happening in Central and South America to Ecuador. What's happening in Honduras, Chile. What's happening to Venezuela. What's happening in Cuba.
Right.
Everything that's happening to us, if we really look at it seriously, we see the relationship.
Thank you. That's what we're trying to look at. And back again, just without going into any depth, Libya was the only country in the world that addressed that issue.
That's right.
Everywhere else, the capital is all forming in the hands of the plutocratic class. They're all meeting at their, and they got that, and that order is in place. And just one last thing on economic theory. You've got supply, demand, you've got all the economic canon and everything. And Lord John Maynard Keynes set the template for everything after the Depression and the Second World War and everything, and it's still there. And he did say in a letter to his grandchildren, wisely, never can be addressed, apparently, by our political or intellectual. The intellectuals are falling down on the job. But he said that in their maturity, a letter to the grandchildren, in their maturity be about now. The country, they were talking about the country or the world, but more the country, with a reference to the United States. You're going to be confronted with something very hard to understand or fathom, and it's going to be massive, technologically induced unemployment.
Sure.
Okay?
Yes.
Now, that may well be coming to do structurally, and there's no other way, given that paradigm, that the only way to distribute demand to the people is for them to have a job on masses estate.
That's right.
Do you understand?
Yes.
And the only country that stood up to that by being socialized and getting a lot of the everyday demands of economic providing of food, shelter, and the basic things apart from, let's say, venture or risk-taking and so forth, there's always risk and everything, was Libya. And so, they were said about, he was also thinking about denominating oil in gold rather than in the dollar.
Scaring them to death, yes.
So what you've got is a challenge, like the United States challenged feudal Europe.
That's right.
And they came and bombed it in the War of 1812, burned Washington to the ground in retribution again. And where the hell are the assize courts? Where are all the institutions? We go and bomb Libya and call him a terrorist.
That's right.
Okay? Because
they are
perhaps he was ahead of history.
To the evil.
He was ahead of history's curve. Do you understand?
Yes,
and the largest issue, how are we going to form capital and distribute demand to people? And that could lead to a situation where people get their identity by their job roles, by and large.
That's right.
Except that's not beginning to wash with the young anymore. You've got a big problem in buying into the paradigm that everybody depends upon growth, and we're going to have jobs for everybody. We're going to have a recovery like we've had out of the past. Doesn't wash. Okay, that's all.
And that recovery never did wash either. we talk about the recovery, but we don't look at Africans, we don't look at the Mexicans and others who are in the nation, and we certainly don't look at indigenous people because we reduced them to concentration camps, who were not a part of any of that recovery.
Right. Well, yeah, right.
Long-term unemployment for us means long-term unemployment.
Well, yes.
You know?
Yeah, you've got to keep them on the plantation.
That's right. That's right.
That's the attitude, and it's not going to wash in. Three-quarters of the world now have cell phones. They got these social networks.
Amen.
People are starting to get the word. You can't allow it all to be owned by a tiny 1% of the population. Own all the assets, set the templates, and everybody else is expected to be a slave on there. And you have to make work. Now, maybe we can do it. Can we create a lot of jobs? There's things we can do. Massa needs another guy to clean his boots or something. You understand what I'm saying?
Maybe get somebody to unplug his ears because he better be getting to listen. Well, times are changing.
Yeah, but now they've gone and they bomb.
Yes.
And they're saying he's a terrorist.
Yes. Not only do they bomb, but they also insult the rest of Africa. The violent insult to the African Union, who said we will work out our own problem.
He helped get the African Union after the Organization
he was the one
of African States.
That is his idea.
Yeah, that's right. He's paid attention to the least among us, among the world population.
That's right.
Which is no.
Yeah.
You don't care about them. You care about only those 12-star hotels where all the rich people already have rich are there.
So the neo-colonists.
Yeah. And
that's
all
the
called
poverty induced by Europe and other places, but primarily by Europe.
And that's called historically legitimate.
Yes.
Everything else is not.
Yes.
Okay, so where is there a real challenge? Maybe he was a challenge.
It is a serious challenge because if you indeed talk about moving beyond the African Union to the Organization of the United States of Africa.
USA.
That's where he said it. That's where Africa is headed. That's where he wants to take it. Of course, we got these African heads of states, many of them reluctant. And holding back because they get
their own nest.
Still getting their nickels
They got
as
bigger
usual.
bank accounts up in Switzerland.
And they don't want to see an uprising of their masses.
Right.
But Gaddafi,
particularly since it's encouraged by the United States and their running dogs.
Yes.
They encourage, look at the people that they align with. They don't care about the people.
Amen.
Okay, that's the point.
And this is why they destabilize many nations in Africa, create what we call these. We got a mass genocide going. Look under the genocide in Rwanda. What will we find? Look under the genocide in Sudan. What will we find beside oil?
They don't care about the people. It's really hypocritical. And the point is, they're blind and they don't have a vision. The country of America doesn't have a vision that's required. Much like the feudal order, people ought to have gotten into the fact that we were going to have an industrial revolution. We're having a post-industrial revolution. We're going through it. His was a model that could be repaired to by the intellectuals, and the intellectuals are all caught up with their ideas. You get your identity by some job you've got or something. All of those issues. They're big issues in terms of sociology and so forth. But it ought to be the progressives, not just these Tea Party people, are saying that something's rotten in Denmark and Washington on the Potomac.
Amen.
Okay.
Well, we've got to do it because as we begin, Harold, to get this message out here, and we've got to get the teaching thing going, and we've got to get it going.
I think so.
Then people begin to understand that if you talk about a democracy, then you're talking about as many of the people, maybe not all of the people, as many of the people as possible involved in the thinking through.
Participatory, yes,
Participatory, yes.
And also, how in the hell can you have a political or sociological democracy if you have economic plutocracy, which is the order of the day?
Right,
and that's all we've got.
Serious contradiction. It is not possible.
Right.
It is not possible for us to talk about a nation that can deliver democracy to the world. We're one of the most violent societies on earth.
Yeah, and we have an incredible capability. I threw that out quick. I really do believe, and this is something that I would like people, and we may be wrong, maybe everything's going to go along like, Mr. Obama thinks and all of that, but he's having real trouble. And they're having real trouble in getting that unemployment, and they got, 35 million people don't have any work. If you don't have work, you starve.
Yes.
That's all.
Yes.
Because you don't have anything, no connection to how the stuff is being produced.
Right.
That's out of touch with what the future requires.
And education, your educational institutions don't provide you with any skills.
They don't.
For doing that.
All they're doing is trying to equip you to be a good, outer-directed slave on masses estate. That's the overall mission of what they're doing.
Yes.
I mean, the educational system is be answerable to an authority figure so you'll fit into corporate capitalism.
Yes. Yes, and
No?
now that they don't have jobs for you, it's designed so you'll be happy to sit around and look at yourself.
Yeah, or
until
no,
you die.
no, you'll do it'll get down to where it's like certain, you'll do anything, because
Yes,
you'll be
that's
hungry.
what I'm saying.
They can just beat the
look around.
bejesus out of you and take away all your rights.
And we've been here. This is like
okay,
the
yeah.
world must understand that where we are now as a people is not new. We've been through the whole feudal systems and the system prior to that, whatever the hell it was.
200,000 long years
Yeah,
of Mount
please.
Sisyphus.
We've
Yeah.
been here before,
Yeah,
but we
right.
were begging and pleading and crawling. I
Yeah.
read some of the biblical stuff and
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Christian
yeah.
biblical stuff. It
Right.
scares me.
Right,
But,
right.
people milling about, and I did the big mass and big
yeah.
hell.
But what's this thing that Mr. King was talking about? We get that promised land. We're going to talk to everybody. Is there anything to that? Is there maybe on the verse
Let's
side?
take him back to 1966 when I know him best.
Yes, dear.
That's in Chicago.
God bless him.
I'll never forget him making a speech where he says that America has to redefine her values.
Yeah.
And he
of
goes
the
on
world, too.
That's
Yeah.
what he's talking about.
But
America
we're
now.
the leader of the world. That's the
right.
point. Yeah.
That you have to redefine her values. That here we were in a nation that the cybernetic age was already on the stage, and he could see it clearly as he talked about needing, less than 2/3 of the population needing jobs. So one of the things that America
did
needed.
say that?
Well, that's Martin King.
He did say that.
That's
Can you
Martin
send me
King.
chapter and verse? That's
I'll
part
have
of
to
our
find it.
teaching curriculum.
Then we're going to have it as a part of teaching
Okay,
curriculum.
good,
He
good.
goes on to say that the first value she must start redefining is the value for work.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Good
that's
for
our
him.
King.
Good for him.
Not
yeah.
only that we must talk about a guaranteed annual income.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Robert
Either you
Theobald, Triple
provide
Revolution.
human beings
Yeah.
with jobs or guaranteed annual income.
Okay, now how
Of
we're going to
course-
get that guaranteed? We could do that by
No,
tax.
no.
You can, is there anything to the idea? This is the thing for the progressives.
Yes.
I don't think there's very much in the right-wing quarters of the society that have much to do with leadership intellectually in terms of the movement of liberation or anything. It's the left wing or it's the liberal wing of the progressive wing, and they are blinkered. That's one of my points. They're blinkered in terms of this thing that the labor participation is being diminished, maybe ought to be, and there has to be an alternate way for that. What it could lead to is a leisure society. A leisured society, not one where you're comfortably leisured. We have the means to arrive at a comfortably leisured society with good design where the people are able to be free to do what they want to do rather than what an economics says they've got to do in order to have bread to feed their kiddies.
But if we start
Slavery.
here, there's a Kent State conference scheduled, I think it's June 25th to 26th.
I still remember that 70 when there were
Oh,
four
yeah, Kent
killed.
State. They're going back to Kent
Four
State this
dead
time
at-
with the unions going back, with
Okay,
workers coming.
yeah.
And hopefully on that agenda will be what we're discussing here.
Well, what is on the agenda ought to be how in the hell is there anything can be done? I don't know. Maybe it's too deeply ingrained.
Well, the
that
head of
capital can
AFL-CIO
only-
is at last calling on the workers now in other words, he's asking for kind of a worker uprising. And let me see if I can quote him.
Okay, who are you
directly
talking
because,
to? Who? King?
Hold on a minute. No, this is AFL-CIO.
Okay.
This is all recent.
Okay.
The AFL-CIO has called for the creation of millions of jobs, security, Medicare, President Richard Trumka,
yeah.
yes, recently argued, but I am increasingly convinced that if we want the law to change, workers must demand that change.
Well, okay, the workers should, but one of the things the workers could have done and been collectively bargainable all along. My granddaddy was a union organizer in Detroit. They fought like demons to get all
That's
those
right, to
things
get anything they got.
They had a hard time doing
Died
it.
like
and it
everybody
did serve
else.
well. Right after the
Yes.
Second War, all that kind of thing, it served pretty well because there was some parity between labor and capital.
But the Wagner Act also emerged immediately after. All of this stuff comes.
But I mean, the thing that they ought to be asking for is ownership. And that's exactly in an interview
That's what we're talking about,
No,
yes.
yeah, but ownership. But people on the left, if I may, okay,
Yes, go
people
ahead.
on the left, liberals, progressives,
Yes.
they hate the word ownership because they think of ownership as being something Massa. Massa owns everything. Now, we don't want no ownership. That's for Massa, the king on the hill. We don't want no asset. And they could have collectively bargained for ownership the capital formation of the advancement of the society, and they didn't. They weren't. They could have done it, and they didn't do it. The only country that did that was Libya.
Yes.
And now we're
we have
attacking
some few
them.
little
And
examples
we shouldn't allow
of
it to
worker-owned
happen.
companies in the United States.
Worker-owned.
Michael Baker Engineering, my brother worked for it in Jackson.
Worker-owned economy.
Workers bought it out, but they all went down. I don't know what happened to them.
A worker-owned private sector.
But now we got to be talking about, yes,
yeah,
the
because
workers are going
you
on
understand,
the economy.
As a way to distribute buying power.
But don't let anybody kick your butt, Harold.
Well,
the lesson for unions is, and it's for Trumpka and those other union bosses who stood by to now, and everything's being ripped away, and they began to speak up a little bit. The truth of the matter is, if workers had said all along that we're not going to obey Wagner, we're not going to obey any of these laws you created for us, we're going to do what Joe Hill and others were doing across the development of union history in the United States. We're going to stay on the battlefield until we get what we want.
Well, that's all right. That's solidarity forever. God bless Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger and solidarity forever and all of that. And it's really good. My granddaddy was an organizer, and I understand all of that. But what they didn't ask for was ownership.
That's what I'm saying. Because if
they could have collectively bargained for
when
that.
Wagner
all
came,
they did
when the
was
first Wagner came, they should have at that point
Mm-hmm.
said, if you're going to tell us that we can only negotiate, bargain, have workouts when you want us to, then we want to demand ownership
they
of the
got sit-down strikes, and it went up. One guy in Detroit, when I was growing up in Detroit, you had a guy working, all the kids went to college, they had all the health, they had everything done from what he did by going to work at Cadillac or Ford.
Yes.
I mean, everything was, but that's changed.
Yes.
And that change was in the air, and it could have been seen. You see, Mr. King saw it, and what the unions could have been bargaining for was ownership of the capital asset.
That's right.
That represented the culture, the non-labor
There will be a
part
shared
of
ownership, sure.
Yeah, no, as a way of distributing income rather than a job. Now, if you've got that coming, like those guys that have all that income, they can do whatever they want. They can do and go make they don't have to answer the call of the whistle at the factory gate. They're just getting money because they own all the assets. If everybody owned the assets in the system, the people could be freed to be concerned with the things that really matter, like taking care of their babies.
That's right.
Maybe making some music, maybe making something really worthwhile, rather than everything laying down to Moloch.
Now we're going to be a community at last, a community.
A community of people who are doing what they want.
Real community.
Autodidactically oriented and doing what they want and liberated from these constraints of a system that's out of date, which the United States of America is the leadership element of this so-called, what do you call it, legitimacy, historical legitimacy, is out of sync with what's required, and there ought to be a rallying cry coming from the left.
It's got to come
from the intellectual.
It's got to come from
the intellectual community.
We've got to have
intellectuals
coming out too who are not owned by a boss. So we've got to look at look at Fulbright and say the arrogance of power and say that the intellectual community on these college campuses will say no, there will be no ROTC at Columbia. No, there will be no more military. We fought that battle in the 60s and 70s. You will not be back here. That we got to have that kind of an intellectual. But that's backbone. And that means risking your life. That means risking everything because this system will kill you.
Well, they will kill you, and they will also make it down to where the only way, if you want your little baby not to starve to death, let's just say, you will, by God, get your ass in that army and go kill people for us. Yes. And then you get a chance to have a little something if you go along with our predators and our asserting our system on the world and asserting themselves.
But the problem with that, Harold, is the other folk are now fighting back in another way.
Well,
and we have never won any of those wars. We'll go off and kill up all these people in Afghanistan. We were looking for bin Laden. Bin Laden, we say we found him. But look at the hundreds of thousands of people whose lives have been destroyed.
Look at Iraq.
The millions in Iraq. Millions in Iraq.
Now
Iraq, which had a highly developed literacy system.
Absolutely. They
highly
were very
developed health system. Yeah. All of these things have been reduced to rubble.
Well, yeah,
and now they must do what they did. The same thing with Libya, reducing it to rubble.
Yeah.
No, we will not stand still.
And
the world must say we won't stand still, America. You can play the game if you want to. But America must say, we as Americans, I don't want to be faced with anybody's guns or bombs or anything else. I want to say, look, I'm not guilty. However, I know I'm here and I have to take responsibility. So I'm going to organize everywhere I can organize to get people to begin to educate themselves about what this system is about, Harold, and to begin to demand that we take over the helms of this government rather than leaving it in the hands of ignorant people. Because it is ignorant to cut off the limb that you're sitting on. Mr. Obama and the corporate Democrats and the corporate Republicans and the capitalists are cutting off the limb.
And the intellectuals. Where is the intellectual? Where is the teaching intellectual?
Serving the needs of those who are cutting off the limb.
They're all bought off.
Yes.
They've all got their mortgage for their pension and their tenured position at the university, and they're bought off.
And don't care about the next generation. But if you cared about the next generation, we would not allow this to happen.
No, but then it's hard, too, to get at a thing where it's a paradigm of paradigms. It doesn't fit into all your things. You're so specialized out, you can't think about the whole. Well, then let's take care of the mortgage and take care of your
Al, you and I both been on college campuses. But we do know what happens on college campuses. At SUNY Albany, I can say that there were many a professor who were struggling with these issues, were struggling against an administration that was oppressive, struggling within the unions. I mean, just so oppressive.
Yeah, it's so bureaucratic.
And then turn departments in on each other. They divide and conquer.
Oh, yes, they can divide. Yes. That's a great way to divide and conquer the intellectual community. They never can think about things in comprehensive terms because they're so specialized. Divide and conquer like they did the people of the world. But another thing is this idea of terrorism, and they got terrorism. Now, how do you define, how do you differentiate between terrorism of the powerful and terrorism of the weak? If you got people who are desperately throwing stones at people, or some of the Sioux Indians, or the Indians who tried to do something, Geronimo, they called the thing Geronimo. I got a thing where he was standing. The point, state terrorism. Madeleine Albright said to Leslie Stahl, what was it, 500,000 babies in Iraq had been killed, and they knew so by our sanctions? That was sanctions, not the bombing, not shock and awe, but sanctions that were killed. Something like 4 million people were killed in Southeast Asia as a result. Remember napalm? Went right to the bone of little children, and we're dropping it on them for some reason. And how come nobody ever, if you're on that side of the plutocratic leaders, so-called, of this outdated Agent regime we call legitimacy, ever went in the dock for war crimes?
Well, I think we need to send all of them to the dock for war crimes.
Well, yeah, but
then that means we got to decolonize the United Nations.
Yeah, well, all right.
It's controlled by us through that Security Council.
Right.
With the nations of the world, the majority of the nations of the world, actually controlled by the Security Council. So the General Assembly has no power.
No, I know, all right.
You know?
Yeah, no, but the point is that the victors all write the history, right? And they call themselves legitimate. I don't think they should be able to get away with it if they don't come up with something that addresses the issues that we're going to try and do.
We had better come up with something that addresses the issues, because the world's going to kick our butt.
Well,
American citizens need to understand 300 million of us are going to get our butts.
There's going to be blowback.
Because we have allowed this to emerge in the world.
Yeah.
Whose
fault is it?
And it's got, what Obama tried, because I'm not a racist.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say try Bush. For war crimes, and not try Obama. Try both of them. Try both of their staff. Try Cheney. Try all of them. Because we have committed horrible war crimes. Going back to Ronald Reagan, who has the nerves and the audacity to do this stuff with Iran. Let's look at it all. We have got to do it. And for war crimes at home. I want to try them for the crimes against women, the crimes against Africans and other peoples of color, for the crimes against indigenous nations. We have to be honest and say, we have had enough of this. But we must, as American people, come to a point where we are moral, and we'll take the moral high ground. Not the moral high ground where we go out and create logical, what seems logical reasoning while we commit crimes on the planet. No, it is our job as American people. We should believe in the thing called democracy and say, yeah, we are going to be the decision makers. We will not lay down and have this go forward anymore. As a mother and a woman facing Mother's Day, I am not satisfied that America will tell me that, first of all, we give the bride and groom for this kingdom called Great Britain. We give them Gaddafi's children and his son as a gift for the wedding. And then for Mother's Day, you're going to tell me that I got to live with the fact you didn't allow this man called, if indeed it's true, that bin Laden was captured, did not allow him to come to the courts of justice to be heard by the rest of the world, before the world. We can't allow this to go on. I don't want that for Mother's Day. I don't want for Mother's Day any more than I wanted to bomb another bus at Birmingham and at Anderson, Alabama.
Can't you see it
Day.
coming if things don't change? There isn't some order. Don't you see? It's just the beginning. There will be other things where these people are going to have to be attacked. We're going to have more predators. We're going to drain. Mr. Stiglitz said we spend something, probably in the end, something like $3 trillion.
Yes,
in Iraq
killing people.
In order to kill them,
killing
to kill.
People.
And everything, and then call
and
it
we
legitimate.
still haven't gotten anything. I woke
still,
up this morning to a bombing in Iraq. 15 to 16 people bombed as police officers, whether they turned them on each other. I woke up to that this morning.
So how do we deal? We got about 5 or 6, 7, 8 minutes left now. How do we deal with it all? We began talking about how we got a large picture about things. We've been here 200,000 years. And we're making a proposition or proposing that this time, this very time, the year 2011, is a time of qualitative transformation.
Yes.
Ladies who have the privilege of bringing new birth into the world know what it is to be in a state of pregnancy and being in a process, and we've all been through the experience of being in the womb as a zygote and so forth, and then into the birth canal, and there comes a time when you come to where the new appears, right?
Yes.
Is it possible that we live in a time where that process of gestation, we've been gestating for 200,000 years. Elephants gest 22 months, I think, but they gestate, and that this whole body, the whole evolution of evolution itself had been and we're coming to a time where there may be beyond, it's a new reality that's emerging in terms of everything. And that we have a capability, we're on the razor's edge now, where apparently this is going to be part of the curriculum for our teaching. The weapon systems are species lethal, are they or are they not? They were in 1970, surely so by then. That's when they reached it, not in 62. There would have been a few straggling survivors at the time of Cuba. We'd built up such a power to be able to kill each other. And then the idea that we may have transcended material scarcity at the level of good design capability of providing for everybody to where there could be the needs and the reasonable wants and aspirations of the human society with everybody involved in a liberated order rather than an enslaved one, which was the way of the old way, that we may be privileged to live at a time when that event is on the horizon in the time frame in which we live, and we could have decision-making capability for that great get-up morning and that all the systems have been... Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes, I understand what you're saying.
I propose we live in that time, and it's time for the intellectual community to start coming up with systems of systems, paradigms of paradigms, understanding of what's going on in order to get toward the latter rather than the former.
I think we have reached that time, Harold.
You do.
I think that we've reached the time when there will be paradigm shift. And I think it's going to come with the very, very young. I've been looking at kids, and I watch them all the time. I watch them in all the colors of the rainbow. So it's
You're
not
talking
a
5-year-olds or 18-year-olds?
I'm talking 2 and 3-year-olds.
Oh, 2 and 3 even, yeah.
And a little girl looked at me last week. She's
gorgeous?
3, and she smiled, and she said, "I like my life." I looked at her and said, "You like your life?"
Yeah.
And she said, "Yes." And she backed off.
Yeah,
and she gave me a smile.
Yeah.
And she put her hand on her hip.
Yeah, that's good.
And she said, "Change."
Yeah.
And
No, really, a 3-year-old.
What is she talking about change? Start studying babies.
Yeah, okay.
Because the technology has produced that which will control it. It will control the agency. These agents of madness have produced in their madness through the technology the opposite, because there's always equal in the opposite.
Well, there's a
And you
there's
see
a
it
balance
in the babies.
between the two.
Yes, you see it in the baby. And these are little small things.
They've always been gorgeous, haven't they?
Oh, they're
Haven't
gorgeous
babies
and they're
always?
sweet. Don't wipe out the babies, Obama.
Yeah.
We see.
Well, they're doing it.
That's
they
what
did.
I'm saying.
They did 3
they've been
little
doing it,
babies there.
Hey,
in order to...
we got kids
with
on
no vision. No vision.
No, none whatsoever. Don't care.
Don't
We
care.
got kids on native reservations as low as 5 years old committing suicide.
Right. That's right.
We got girls from the Latin immigrant community in their teens committing suicide.
Let's hope these are all birth pangs.
We are going to have to see that other group who's saying, "I don't like what you did to my sisters." We saw it. I can give you a story of a young people from Canada, I got a call from a teacher when I was at Birmingham. She called for Dr. King. And someone came at with Jim Foreman from SNCC, Foreman from SNCC, the maid or whoever, said, come.
You were with them all,
there's a call in Dr. King's room.
Yeah.
So I had the privilege of going in Dr. King's room.
God bless you.
And the only time I was in there. At the hotel, the Gaston Hotel, and talking with a woman on the phone from Canada who had 6th graders. And she said, my 6th graders want to come to Birmingham to join their peers. And I never thought about it. Of course, I was out of Mississippi.
That before the little babies were bombed or after?
Oh, this is before. This is May.
Okay,
the babies will be bombed in September. This is when I take my horrible beating. A few days before I take that horrible beating.
Physically?
Physically,
okay,
yes.
So
I am on the phone, and I recognized that this woman, I said to Jim Foreman, I said to Foreman, I said, look, she wants to bring kids to Birmingham. And he said, what? And so I just said, look, miss, this is a very dangerous time to bring children to Birmingham. And your kids, are they all white? She said, they're all white. I've got two, she said, my class and the 2nd class. She said, but they see their peers on TV. They see them and they don't like what they see.
They can see them on
They
the
want to
cell
come
phone
and fight with them. They want to come and do the dog in the water.
That's what we got to get.
What we're having is the young who are looking at what's happening. And the young, I had a group in from a school right outside of England, outside of London last week that I spoke to. They were 15, 18-year-olds. These young people are bright. They're intuitive. And they are asking questions that are real questions, as our kids locally are asking them. We have a new generation on the horizon, but I'm impressed with the 15 to 18-year-olds, my grandkids included, but I'm more impressed
with them little ones.
With the 2 and 3-year-olds.
It's encouraging.
Who are coming up, who are taking a look at what's above them in the teen group, and are saying, I like my life.
Okay, right.
I like my life.
The
kids in Canada were saying, what? I want to join my peers. I'm willing to put my life on the line, too. I want to dance in that water.
It's about time the good book says somewhere, the children shall lead you, and maybe we should do good to listen to that.
And I think the children will lead us.
I don't
know about the good book, but I think the children are our potential for bringing us out of the madness, because they understand the technology in ways which they don't. They understand the women's revolution in ways in which we don't, because they're going through the process.
Yeah, that's right. And it
so
may
we're the trees, but these kids are going through the process.
And it's a responsibility for people, seriously. This teaching idea happened to be Vietnam back then. 70, I think, is a major point. That's when a lot of crescendo was building up in the evolution. 70s, we could get back to that spirit, I think. And we have a lot to present. Intellectuals or people who are concerned with these things have a lot to teach themselves and to get to some sort of thing where there's an alternative rather than just reifying the outdated institution.
Everybody's got a right
sing us
to
out.
live.
Yeah, okay.
Everybody's got a right to live. And before I let this thing go down, I'll be buried in the ground. Everybody's got a right to live. Listen here to me, Mr. USA. No more full-time work, man, for no part-time pay. So we've reached that stage where we're saying we don't even want to work, brother. We want to work together in owning the resources of the land.
I think that's really the most important
part. We want to share the land, because the land is where the resources are.
Not only the land, the resource, and the thing is that it may be a great get-up morning coming if we could get to a state of liberation. There'd be a resonancy that inter-accommodated us to a liberated humanity within an ecological order that would inter-accommodate us to a universe at a level transcendent to what we've been for 200,000 years, a new relationship in universe. We're privileged to live at that time. We ought to get ourselves together and get on the stick and start providing some leadership in terms of understanding things intellectually that we could provide to our so-called leaders that are really worthy of following.
Can I say to New York, I'll join you.
Do it fast.
Meet me in New York at the Kent State University on June the 25th to 26th, where we're going to talk about organizing with labor. And we'll get to the work when we're going to start the teach-ins in New York City.
Be there and be square. That's too old-fashioned, right? Thanks for viewing. Pleasure talking to Colia Clark. Thanks for viewing. We'll be coming back again tomorrow. Colia, thanks again for all the great work and inspiration you provided, and thanks a lot.
Well, thank you, Harold, for being there.
Okay, we'll be coming back tomorrow. Tune in, and that's it for this particular two-part series. Thanks again, Colia.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.